The skill of forgiveness. Finally, we've come to the main thing. Forgiveness. When I was preparing material for this book, there were words in my notes encouraging the reader to forgive, literally a plea, you need to forgive because, followed by some psychological, religious arguments, as if there was a goal to convince the reader that they must do this. Now, I'm not making a plea or forcing anyone to forgive. The desire to do this should come from you, from the bottom of your heart. Just as it's impossible to force love, it's impossible to make someone let go of their resentment. Everyone must come to this on their own. I also got into situations where I was very hurt, and it seemed to me that I'd been treated unfairly, and I craved revenge. But having suffered enough, I came to understand that I wanted to cast off my resentment, shake it off, like some kind of burden that weighed me down and made life difficult. This impulse, the desire to renew one's inner state, appears as a consequence of prolonged emotional distress. When you get tired of remembering and replaying unpleasant words in your head, when you get tired of being angry, sad, and reliving events that make you suffer. There is a boiling point, as it were, when you grow so anxious for a change that things in the past become unimportant. What caused pain is reset to zero. What he said, what she didn't do, it doesn't matter anymore. It's only the state of my soul that matters now. I want to forgive. It is maturity and readiness to let go of what happened in the past that makes a person inquiring and attentive. Do you know what this manifests itself in? Among other things, in internet stats, in numerous internet queries like how to forgive a person, how to forgive infidelity, how to let go of resentment. When a hurt person is ready to part with their pain, they diligently seek ways to do it. In this state, the person focuses not on what torments them, but on what will help them to be free. I don't know what state you're in now. Perhaps you still have the strength to hate, to imagine a scene of revenge, to pity yourself. If you want to and can, no one can forbid you to do this. But there would be others as well, those who would have come across this book in a state of complete readiness to part with their pain. Such a person will read and reread carefully and make notes if necessary. Such a person will try to sincerely realize what they've read. Do you know why? Because forgiveness is work. It requires an effort. To forgive, you need to descend into your pain as into the depths of the sea, explore it, determine its severity. You need to find a way of help that is specifically suitable to you. Is it necessary only to rethink what happened? Or do you need to have a talk with the person who hurt you? Or else it's more fitting to let go of the situation, leaving it wholly in the province of God and His judgment. How to forgive what can't be forgiven. There are cases when there is no one to talk to. There is no one and nothing to understand, because the other party is an unstable, insane person. For example, a criminal or a rapist. There are some people who are in a state of an unshakable pride. They know no pity, no regret. Their conscience is as good as dead. In this case, talking to them would be pointless. It's not worth justifying the vile thing they've done. Sometimes there is pain in life that's impossible to cope with, impossible to understand. There is no strength to justify it, and it's hard to live with it. Murder, violence, meanness, betrayal, a broken fate. How to forgive such things? How to understand and justify someone who broke someone's life? We have to remember, to forgive doesn't mean to erase the sin from the wrongdoer's soul. it doesn't mean freeing them from the responsibility for what they've done. No. To forgive is to regain your lost peace. It's to break the mental connection that torments the soul and seems to hold it on a hook. To forgive is to become free, not to free someone else. Therefore, if something terrible happened to you, and it's very difficult to let it go just like that, don't be afraid to allow yourself to think, I will forgive this person. Whether you forgive them or not, they will still answer for what they've done. Because God made the world this way. The world is fair, even if it doesn't seem so at first glance. Justice lies in the fact that everyone will answer for their actions. They will receive punishment for evil things and will be rewarded for virtuous deeds. This is written many times in the Bible. Besides the fact that God is the creator of this world, He is the best doctor, the best artist, engineer, and also psychologist, with a keen understanding of the human soul. He provided for everything. He knew that something painful and unjust could happen, that a person would not be able to cope with, would not be able to either cope with this pain or protect themselves. Therefore, there are these words in the Bible. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, It is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. If you can't deal with the pain on your own, you can ask God to help you. Lord, you see that I've been treated unfairly. You see that I can't defend myself. You see that it hurts intolerably. Please help me, stand up for me, calm my pain. In some cases, it's more correct to give your pain over to God, to resign yourself to what happened, to be patient, and just move on. The judgment will be passed by God. It may seem that a person is capable of judging perfectly, of fully repaying the offender with the same coin, that they have the strength and wisdom for this. But this is not so. Sometimes we don't have enough strength to cope with our emotions, with our personal state. We don't have the strength of spirit to admit that we are in the wrong. What can be said about another person whose soul is a mystery to us? If you observe life in general, you can see that God's patience is great. God gives time for repentance, for compensation of damage, for reconciliation, for awareness. But if this doesn't happen, His revenge is fierce. An orphan, a widow, a weak, defenseless person can't be offended. One can't offend a wife, parents, a poor, needy person, because God will stand up for each of them. We're not talking about this in order to wait with malice for God's revenge. No, it's not for that. It's important to understand. In some cases, it's better to give your pain to God's province. He will figure it out, judge, and punish according to one's deeds. And you will feel light and unburdened. Forgiveness. We've reached the point where the picture in your mind's eye has come together. You've looked at your pain from the third person's perspective. You tried to understand the motive of the wrongdoer's behavior. You've familiarized yourself with available options. You can understand and forgive on your own, or you can talk to the person who hurt you. You can forgive actively and emotionally, or only emotionally. You may not forgive at all if you are not ready or don't want to do it. You are free to do as you see fit. You are able to make a more balanced decision by now, what to do with your resentment. Continue to live with it, tightly pressing it to your chest, or let it go. You might say, yes, I sincerely want to forgive, but I don't know how. I understand everything with my mind, but my heart still hurts. This is normal. Forgiveness is not a quick process. It's work. where one has to make an effort. Up to this point, we've mostly analyzed the opponent as well as the circumstances of what happened and options for forgiveness. Now let's focus on ourselves. As we said before, the way we react to this or that situation is how the inner world of each of us manifests itself. What kind of person am I? What do I represent? Am I proud or humble, kind or evil, calm or quick-tempered? A conflict with another person reveals what each of us has inside, what we are like. The state of the human soul can be in either of the two extremes, in a state of pride or in a state of humility. And throughout life, each of us oscillates between these extremes. This happens because we grow up, gain experience, and change, and throughout our lifetime, each of us either hardens or, on the contrary, becomes softer in relationships with others. Always keep in mind that the person who caused you pain has also gone through something in their life, and something made them that way. In no way are we justifying anyone, but we are being observers, researchers of the human soul. Your own truth. Do you know why it can be hard to forgive? While it takes two to start a conflict, only one has to forgive. How much easier it would be to deal with the pain if every wrongdoer fell to their knees after causing someone pain and sincerely said, "Forgive me, I regret it, I didn't want to. If I could turn back time, I would have acted differently." As it is, people are mostly left alone with their grief. Indeed, why is there so little repentance in relationships and so much mutual blaming? Very often, when people part ways, there remain unsatisfied claims and mutual accusations rather than understanding and acceptance. Isn't it because if you talk to each separately and hear the opinion of the other party, you will hear their own truth? Different people look at the same things differently. They perceive differently, act differently, and have different expectations too. Something can be obvious and clear for one, and totally incomprehensible for another. In general, there are cases when you speak up, tell your partner about your pain, and it's as if they don't hear you. They may even say, "Don't make it up. Don't take it close to heart. It's nonsense. You imagined it all." It may be nonsense to you, but it hurts me. Both can be right, because it's the subjective reality of each. For many years now, I've been observing a certain situation where a mother and her daughter can't get on. The slightest heart-to-heart conversation between them turns into angry mutual reproaching. Either of them tells such pitiful stories from their life that you want to hug and pity her and see the other guilty of all the troubles. But if you're impartial and listen to them separately, you will find that both say something that sounds like the truth. They tell things that you couldn't make up if you tried. They've been expressing their pain to each other for years. Why do they do this? Isn't it because both of them want to be heard? And both of them, in the depths of their soul, are waiting for words of repentance. For example, "Forgive me, I was rude and inconsiderate. I said a lot I shouldn't have. I'm sorry." Why doesn't this happen? Isn't it because one's own truth is blinding and it seems to a person that they're right while the other is very guilty? Yes, it may be that you were hurt and the other is really guilty, but your anger blinds you. Pain blinds. It magnifies the scale of what happened and doesn't allow you to understand what's important. "You cheated on me. How could you? I will never forgive you." It sounds final and unappealable. In such cases, people part with deeply wounded hearts, never having heard each other. And how could it be otherwise if we haven't slept together for a year? For a year now, everyone has been living their own life, mechanically performing household duties. Didn't you notice this? Each person has their own argued and well-grounded truth. Each has their own state of soul. These two factors influence the state of the conflict. Whichever one has a softer heart, whichever one is more capable of hearing the other, is able to cope with their pain. Whichever one has a harder heart will stick with their opinion, and it's more difficult for them to forgive. Sometimes a question arises, should we forgive? The whole world insists that we should. By all means. Sometimes a person tries to forgive out of a sense of duty, rather than out of their own free will. I am probably repeating myself, but I'm not urging you to forgiveness. I'm not trying to convince you that you need it. Maybe you need it, and maybe you don't. I don't know. This is for you to decide. Have you mulled over it? What have you decided? Are you ready? The readiness to part with your suffering, anger, self-pity, or a desire for revenge or to prove something to somebody comes to everyone in its own time. This is very subjective. Someone has to languish in their pain, be led by it, struggle with it, and someone immediately decides, pain is not for me. I want to be free faster. At 15, I decided that I wanted to forgive my father and build a warm relationship with him. So I did just that. Then I was ready to follow a certain path, make an effort over myself, be patient. Therefore, there were meetings, conversations, and a sincere desire to understand each other. I didn't want to reproach him like, why did you abandon us? I wanted to hear the truth from the other party. This approach is applicable to any relationship. You can also sincerely want to understand the person who betrayed you. Hear answers to the questions, why did you cheat on me? Why didn't you love me? Why did you treat me like this? Is the reason in me or in you? Far be it for the problem to be about the person who's been hurt. You can be a perfect wife, a perfect husband, but still get into an unpleasant situation, the reason for which is not you, but the psychological state of the partner, which has always been with them. Sometimes, the reason lies in the quality of the relationship. Separately, both partners are normal people, but after they have come some way together, the quality of their relationship has led to what it has led to. We can say that both parties are responsible. In fact, there are many subtleties in conflicts that one needs to be bent on figuring out. To forgive, you need to take into account the kind of the relationship, the context, and the desired goal. For example, there are parent-child relationships. They're radically different from others. It's the adults who are responsible for the pain inflicted on a small person for years on end. The child is dependent on its parents and therefore vulnerable. This cannot be said about personal relationships, where two adults are responsible. If an elderly mother can be understood, forgiven, and one does not have to live near her, one's husband or wife is a person living in the same place and who one closely interacts with, and their active conscious participation is necessary. If parents can be forgiven in advance, before they have realized and recognized their guilt, then with your other half you would want them to hear you. To forgive a traitor, it's important that they sincerely regret what they did, that they themselves want this forgiveness. After all, we know cases when one of the spouses turns the relationship into hell, doesn't regret it, and doesn't promise to change. How to interact with such a person if they're on their own wavelength? The same goes about forgiving the unworthy behavior or betrayal of friends. Here there should be interaction as well, the participation of both sides, not just one who's a putty in the other's hands. And here we should remember that forgiveness can be emotional and active, or only emotional. Also, it's important to understand yourself, what I am ready for, what I am capable of, and what I'm not. There are people for whom trust is the main value in relationships, and if it is not there, a person cannot relax. They are constantly on the lookout for a new stab in the back. There is no sense of security. How does one maintain the relationship if it is irreparably spoilt for them? In this case, you can say, I forgive you, I understand, I sympathize, I am sorry it happened the way it did, but I cannot be in a relationship with you. Gratitude. Please pay special attention now. I will be saying very important things. At least I feel they're very valuable. The thing is, we get hurt by those who we're in some sort of relationship with, by those we love or loved. In many cases, despite the bitterness and the sad ending, there was a lot of good there. The human psyche is peculiar for being able to mix bitter and sweet things into one. It turns out that when something bad happened, we seem to devalue the good with our reaction. Yes, we often quarreled, but we also had many shared moments of joy. Yes, the relationship ended on a sad note, but the beginning was good. Still we return to the past in our mind. In thoughts, we seem to relive the plot again, see the picture, feel the smell, remember the words, right? To live with a husband for 20 years and to believe that there was nothing but bad things, that there is nothing to remember. To bear a grudge against the father who showed up only on holidays. But he did show up, and then there was joy, wasn't there? I'm all for keeping the good good, and keeping the bad separately from the good. Not devaluing your choice, not desecrating with your pain what was once bright and precious to you. When you understand that you have something to thank the wrongdoer for, it becomes a little easier to find it in your heart to forgive. Common photos, shared experiences, youth spent together, even a friendship that ended in betrayal. There still would have been many days of fun to look back on with fondness. A person who knows how to appreciate, who can be grateful and who can look at things from different angles, finds it easier to build and enjoy a happy life. Rather than someone. Don't mix the bad and the good into one. The path of forgiveness. The path of forgiveness begins with determination, with a desire to do it. Then the analytical mind kicks in, which helps to understand, analyze, and find answers to questions. If this process runs qualitatively, then the person who has just been suffering is able to come back to their senses, and it becomes easier for them. They seem to let go of the situation, as if they give the wrongdoer over to the judgment of the universe, and no longer want anything with them, neither to prove anything, nor to take revenge, nor to try to understand, because they have already decided on the main thing for themselves. While you were reading this book, we encouraged your analytical mind to notice and find new details. We encouraged you to pay attention to what was not quite obvious. You tried to understand both yourself and the opponent. Some would have succeeded, and indeed felt relief, as if already standing on the threshold of forgiveness. In fact, forgiveness is a process stretched over some time. It doesn't happen with a snap of the fingers. You can start today, and only after a month come to the conclusion, I have succeeded. For some, this magic hasn't happened, and this is also normal. One reason could be that the person is not really ready to part with their pain. For now, they seem to take satisfaction in pitying themselves, or there is still a need to experience negative feelings. Another reason could be that they need to work a little more. When we go through an emotionally vivid experience, the feelings are especially clearly imprinted on the mind. We feel pleasure remembering it. For example, like I told you about the 17 roses. They impressed me positively, and I look back on that day with joy. Conversely, if a person has experienced pain, Then they relive emotional suffering when recalling visual images, how it happened, how they were taking it, and how they understood it. Simultaneously, corresponding neural connections are established in the brain. While thinking or remembering, one gets used to thinking in a certain way. It's as if one walks along one path in their head, and the path gets clearer with every step. And that's the way it happens. Positive thinking lifts one's spirits, while negative thoughts make one suffer and reinforce the conclusions they have come to. For example, how could he do this? What a bastard! I will never forgive him. And as the woman relives the suffering again and again, her wound doesn't heal. It only gets worse. Do you understand? The pain of unforgiveness is exacerbated by the fact that the same record is played repeatedly in the head. The task of the person who set out to forgive is to break these neural connections, but this can only be done through the creation of new ones. It's exactly when you begin to understand and think differently that this happens. New connections are created, and the old ones are destroyed. This is one part of the process. The second is to cope with your emotions. Often it so happens that a person faced with stress suppresses part of the negative emotions in themselves, doesn't recognize them, doesn't allow themselves to experience them. For example, to show irritation, express their pain, ask a question, appears undelicate. On the one hand, it's important to experience every emotion, and on the other, to actually get rid of it once it runs its course. To experience it is to recognize that it exists, and to feel it for some time, to be in a state of anger, resentment, despondency. To release it is to shout it out, to speak out, to manifest it in some way. For example, men emotionally unload in the gym through physical exertion. Women tend to emotionally unload through communication with friends, but in the case of a specific problem, there should be a meaningful conversation, not just idle chat, but a talk where you get quality feedback. Feelings are energy. Positive emotions uplift us and inspire us in everyday life, because it's much more pleasant to live easily and joyfully. Negative feelings, meanwhile, drain us emotionally because we resist them. No one wants to suffer. Everyone wants to experience pleasure. When we concentrate our attention, we sense feelings as some energy in the chest area: fear, anger, sadness. It happens that feelings fill you, and you suppress them and don't allow them to come to the surface. Then it feels as if negative energy is bursting you from the inside. With the energy of pain becoming too overwhelming, a person cries. And after crying, it becomes easier, until next time. In general, suppressing your emotions is a dangerous thing. No matter how much you suppress anger, pain in yourself, it will still come out, in the form of a nervous breakdown, a low-grade depression, or a physical illness. It rather depends. The most reasonable thing is to be on the lookout for negative feelings, and if they do appear, to deal with them correctly. Why suffer if you don't have to? I always say, bring your complexes, fears, resentment, beliefs under scrutiny and work with them. These are all grey cardinals that control our decision-making. The path of forgiveness is to give yourself what you need, regularly and continuously. For example, to express your pain in words many times. To try to see the situation from a different angle. To find answers to tormenting questions. Why? For what? Could it have been different? You ought to understand your needs and satisfy them. Many suffer from not allowing themselves to tell the other everything they think because they want to spare them, or are ashamed to admit their weakness. Someone else gets fixated on subjective conclusions. Each case is unique in its own way. But those who work with their condition come off victorious. They succeed if they don't just live their pain and try to suppress memories, but really make an effort. This is the end of The Skill of Forgiveness by Svetlana Zhiruk. Read by James Buchman. Thank you.